My name is Victor Tanner, and I was 61 years old the Sunday afternoon my brother called to tell me the family had held a meeting I had not been invited to. The Savannah heat came through the screen door on Habersham Street the way it does in November. Still and close, not quite summer, not quite gone. I had been working at the desk in the home office when the phone rang. I recognized Carl's voice before he said my name. I had been recognizing what Carl sounded like when he had decided something since we were children. I thought about what he said for 40 minutes. Then I went to the filing cabinet. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, where silence is never surrender. If you've ever been overlooked by people who should have seen you first, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Victor Tanner. I am 61 years old. I founded Tanner Electrical in Savannah, Georgia in 1993. With $19,000 in personal savings, a used service van I bought from a retiring electrician in Pooler, and a list of general contractors in the historic district and South Side that I had spent 3 years building at 6 a.m. Chamber of Commerce breakfast before anyone else was awake enough to be useful. I had my license. I had my van. I had a folding table in the living room on Habersham Street where I did estimates after dinner, with Rose reading on the sofa across from me and the ceiling fan turning and the Savannah night coming in through the windows. Rose and I had been married 36 years. She had been there for all of it. The lean years when the business ran on receivables that came in 30 days late. The good years when we paid off the house and took our first vacation since our honeymoon. And the particular years in between where you cannot tell yet which kind they are. She understood the shape of what I had built in the way that people understand things they have watched being built from the beginning. I had 2 siblings. Carl was 58, 3 years younger, and had spent most of his adult life in and out of contracting businesses that did not quite survive. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had made decisions that left him dependent on outcomes he had not created, and that dependency had, over time, produced a particular kind of grievance, the kind that looks like fairness but is actually arithmetic. Patricia was 54, 7 years younger than me, and lived in Tampa with her second husband. She had not been to Savannah in 2 years before her father died. She called on birthdays and holidays and for significant events, and she was warm on the phone, and she had signed the amendment request without, I suspected, fully reading it. My father was Thomas Tanner. He died on October 12, 2019, at 81, at Candler Hospital in Savannah, with Carl and me and a nurse named Dolores in the room. Patricia arrived 3 hours after. He had been a practical man, a retired pipefitter, organized about money and documents in the way of men who had grown up without enough of either. He had signed his will in March of 1993, the same year I founded the company, with Miriam Cross as his attorney. The will named me as primary beneficiary of the family estate, the Habersham Street property where I grew up, a commercial lot on Wheaton Street, and whatever remained of his savings account. It named Carl and Patricia as secondary beneficiaries, with equal shares of the residual after the primary distribution. Miriam had given my father a copy and kept one on file. She had also given me a copy because I had been at the signing and my father had asked me to hold one. I kept it in the home office filing cabinet in a brown document, envelope marked Tanner, estate, in my handwriting. I had not looked at it in years. I had known it was there the way you know a document is in a cabinet. Not as something you are protecting, but as something that exists and has a place. My throat tightened the first time Carl mentioned fairness in the context of the estate. It was at Thanksgiving dinner, 2020, 14 months after our father died, and the estate was still in probate. He had said, over coffee, that he hoped everything would work out fairly for everyone. The word fairly. I noted it. I said nothing at the table and noted the date when I got home. My stomach turned the morning Carl's email arrived with a PDF attached. The subject line was Family Discussion, Estate Matters. The PDF was a summary of a proposed amendment to the estate distribution, not the will itself, but a document outlining a proposed reallocation that would divide the estate equally 3 ways, removing my primary beneficiary status. It had Patricia's name on it, as well as Carl's. It had been drafted. The email said, with the help of an attorney, not Miriam, someone in Carl's network whose name I did not recognize. My hands folded on the legal pad when Rose read it over my shoulder and said nothing. I had paid Carl's second mortgage for 11 months in 2011 when his contracting business collapsed. 11 monthly payments, directly to the bank, without making him ask more than once. I had driven Patricia's son Marcus to his EMT certification classes every Tuesday for 8 months in 2014, when Patricia's car was repossessed and she was between jobs and Marcus had a shot at something he wanted. 8 months of Tuesday evenings, 41 miles round trip. I had filed and managed the family's joint property tax account for 22 consecutive years after my mother asked me to take it over in 2001 because she could not manage the paperwork and Carl had said he would do it and had not. I had covered my father's funeral expenses in full, $14,200, the week he died, when Carl said he did not have it and Patricia said she would contribute when she could. I kept the receipt in the accordion folder in the home office next to the document envelope. I recognized Patricia's signature on the amendment request when it arrived. I recognized Carl's. I recognized that they had arrived at this together, in a meeting I had not been part of, and that the shape of the thing was, I had done well, therefore I needed less. I had carried this family for 31 years, and the carrying had become, in the arithmetic they were using, evidence that I could carry more. I did not respond to Carl's email that day. I noted the date. The phone call that settled it happened at 3:14 p.m. on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. I was at the desk in the home office, working through a billing dispute from a commercial client. I still handle selective cases, even in semi-retirement, because the work was mine and I was not ready to be entirely done with it. Carl called and did not open with pleasantries. He said the family had talked it over. He said the consensus was that the current will distribution was not equitable given everyone's circumstances. He said the rest of the family felt that my name did not belong in the primary position anymore. My breath stopped. I didn't answer. He kept going. He said he hoped I could understand where they were coming from. He said I had done well for myself, and the rest of them had not had the same advantages. He said it was not personal. He said Dad would have wanted things to be fair. Something in him closed down at the same advantages. I sat with that. I had organized the estate inventory myself after my father died. 3 full weekends, every item cataloged, every account listed, the commercial lot documented and appraised. Because Carl had said he was too busy and Patricia was in Tampa and someone had to do it. I had personally guaranteed the family's inherited commercial property loan when it came up for renewal in 2015, and neither sibling could qualify, sign my name, put my credit score on the instrument, kept the family asset from being sold at a loss. I had rebuilt the electrical systems in the family's Savannah rental property over 2 weekends in 2018. Materials out of my own pocket, because the tenant had complained and the property needed the work, and nobody else was going to do it. 31 years. Every mortgage, every bill, every funeral. Carl said the family had already spoken to a probate attorney about filing an amendment. My hands went still on the edge of the desk. He said it was a family decision. He said he hoped I would not make it difficult. I nodded to myself. I said I understood. I thanked him for calling. I set the phone on the desk at 3:31 p.m. I sat for 13 minutes without moving. Rose came to the door of the home office and looked at my face. She did not ask. She went to the kitchen and came back with 2 cups of coffee and set one on the corner of the desk and sat in the chair by the window. At 8:47 p.m., I went to the filing cabinet. I found the brown document envelope marked Tanner Estate. I opened it. The 1993 was inside, 4 pages cream-colored, notarized at the bottom of the last page in blue ink on March 3rd, 1993. My name was in it twice on the first page and once in the distribution clause. My father's signature was at the bottom of page for a particular handwriting I had known for 61 years. I also found, clipped to the inside of the envelope, a 1-page notation in Miriam's handwriting from 1993. Any subsequent amendment to this document required written notification to all named beneficiaries before filing, per the estate's governing clause. Carl's attorney, whoever that was, had not notified me. The amendment request had been sent informally by email. No formal written notice had been delivered. No certified letter. No process server. Nothing that the governing clause required. I called Miriam Cross at 7:33 the following morning. Miriam Cross had been practicing estate law in Savannah for 31 years. She was 63, measured, with an office on Drayton Street that smelled of old paper and a particular kind of order that comes from 3 decades of keeping other families' documents straight. She had represented the Tanner estate since 1993. She knew the will, the clause, and the history. I was in her waiting room at 10:02. She brought me in at 10:22. I set the original will and the notation on her desk. I told her what Carl had said and what the email had contained and what had not been delivered. She read the notation. She put it down. She said, "They didn't notify you." I said no. She said the governing clause was enforceable. She said any amendment filed without proper written notification to all named beneficiaries was contestable and subject to invalidation. She said the original 1993 will remain the controlling document until a properly executed amendment superseded it. And no properly executed amendment had been filed because the notification requirement had not been met. She said she would call Carl and Patricia at 9 a.m. Monday for the formal notification requirement. Not as a courtesy, but as a required procedural step that their attorney had skipped. She did. At 9 a.m. on Monday, Miriam Cross called Carl Tanner and Patricia Morse and formally notified them, as required by the estate's governing clause, that the original 1993 will remain the controlling document, and that any amendment required compliance with a notification procedure that had not been followed. Bernard Okafor at the Chatham County Probate Office received Miriam's formal filing on Tuesday at 2:48 p.m., documenting the original will's standing and procedural deficiency in the proposed amendment. I drove home on Habersham Street at 2:33 in the afternoon. The Savannah oaks made shade on the sidewalk in the November light. I went inside. Rose was in the kitchen. I sat at the table where I had done estimates for 30 years and looked at the ceiling fan turning in the quiet. 31 years is not a background detail. It is the whole story. I had paid Carl's mortgage when he could not. I had driven Patricia's son when she had no car. I had filed the taxes and organized the inventory and guaranteed the loan and covered the funeral and done it all without keeping a public record of any of it. Because that was not why I had done it. I had done it because my father had built something and someone had to keep it, and I was the one who stayed. The 1993 will said that. It said it in the distribution clause, and my father's handwriting on the last page. It had been saying it for 28 years in the filing cabinet on Habersham Street, waiting for the one occasion when the paper would need to speak louder than anyone in the room. Carl called on Tuesday morning. His voice was different from the Sunday voice. Less certain, more careful. The voice of a man who has discovered that the procedural move he thought was finished has a step he missed. He said he wanted to talk. He said there must have been a miscommunication about the process. My stomach dropped at miscommunication. I said I was available Thursday. At 9:04 a.m. on Thursday, Carl and Patricia arrived at Miriam's office on Drayton Street. Patricia looked tired. Carl had a folder. Miriam had the original will and the probate filing and the governing clause notation on the conference table. Miriam walked them through the procedural requirements. She was specific and methodical. She explained what the notification clause required, what had not been provided, and what the consequence was for the amendment as filed. She explained that Judge Allison Price of the Chatham County Probate Court had confirmed the original will's standing as a controlling document in a reference ruling filed at 4:17 p.m. Friday, which Bernard Okafor had processed and entered into the estate record. Carl's hands went flat on the table when Miriam finished. For a moment, nothing. Patricia's posture changed. A small, settling shift. The kind that happens when something a person has been counting on is no longer there to count on. I looked at the original will on the table. I did not say anything beyond what the situation required. Something in me held very still. I said, the original will is a document. It was executed correctly. The notification requirement exists to protect all parties. It wasn't followed. I kept my words level. I did not list what I had done for them. I did not need to. The document was sufficient. Miriam asked if Carl and Patricia wished to pursue a properly notified amendment process. Carl looked at his folder. He looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at the table. Carl said he needed to think about it. He did not file an amended amendment. The estate settled under the original 1993 will on January 9th. The Wheaton Street commercial lot transferred to my name on the 14th. The savings account, $47,000, transferred on the 17th. The Habersham Street property, the house where I grew up, passed to me per the primary distribution clause. Carl and I spoke twice in January. Both calls were short. He was not cruel. He was quiet in the way that people are quiet when they have arrived at the end of something and do not know yet what comes next. I did not press him. I was not interested in his contrition or his explanation. I was interested in whether we could, at some point further down the road, be brothers again in the ordinary sense, the sense that does not require anyone to keep score. That would take longer than January. That was all right. Patricia sent a card in February. It said she was sorry for how things had gone. I kept it because she had written it by hand, and because it cost her something to send, and I understood the cost. Victor Tanner, 61 years old, and still primary on the document his father signed in 1993. A $14,000 funeral. A $3,800 a month memory care placement. 31 years of March tax filings. And one brown envelope in a filing cabinet that never moved from its place on Habersham Street. The paper, the original, the one that was there before anyone decided it wasn't. Have you ever been the one who carried the family and watched someone try to rewrite the history of who did? Leave your answer in the comments below. If this story hit close to home, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.